Well, the number one thing is grounding ourselves in what is the actual business outcome we want to drive. And so once you have that, it becomes a little easier to put a measurement strategy in place. We're a paid media agency. So we do, can appreciate the fact that clients want to drive conversions. They want to drive an efficient return on ad spend. But the way to do that is by investing in the top and mid funnel and then re-engaging those audiences effectively. We want to get a very holistic picture as to what they're doing, what's working, what's not.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that, and we will get back to you. Today's guest is Anthony Ciaravallo, the marketing mastermind behind okay, one more time. Today's guest is Anthony Ciaravallo, the marketing mastermind behind some of the most successful performance marketing campaigns of the past decade. He's the founder and CEO of Valo Media, and he's placed over $100 million in paid media for global giants like Nike, Amazon, and FedEx, while helping startups scale with precision crafted campaigns that drive serious ROI. We're super excited to learn from him. Anthony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jules. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So you've got a media company. Where did you see a good fit for yourself when you were first deciding that you were going to come up with your own media company? There's so many of them out there. Where did you see the market fit? How did you see yourself fitting in?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I came from the big agency world, and prior to that, I was in sales and content marketing. I was also a marketing director for a healthcare nonprofit. So I'd been in the marketing world for a long time. And, it was kind of a goal of mine to join a big agency, like one of the big holding companies, working with some of the largest, most successful brands in the world. And I did that for about 6 years and I loved it. I met so many amazing people, worked with some incredible clients, but I also saw the frustrations and the inefficiencies with performance and the price and this, how slow everything moved. And I said to myself, right around COVID, how can we do this better, faster, and for less, and really act as a true partner for our clients? And so that was the spirit in which I founded Valo Media. We're a digital performance marketing agency. We specialize in paid media activations across the digital ecosystem. So think paid search, paid social, programmatic. And ultimately, when we look at an engagement with any particular brand or client, whether it be, Fortune 100 or whether it be a small startup, the number one thing we like to do is ground ourselves in the business and in what are the outcomes that we want to drive in the business and how can media ultimately support those objectives. So that was the mission behind why I started Valo Media.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that we see that costs people a lot of money is wasted ad spend. You have these people who definitely want to reach the right people. And it sounds like the first thing you do is figure out who are we going to reach and why. So then how do you best gear them for performance so they don't waste their ad spend?
Yeah, well, the number one thing, like I had kind of just touched on, is grounding ourselves in what is the actual business outcome we want to drive. And so once you have that, it becomes a little easier to put a measurement strategy in place. And tracking is really, really key when it comes to digital paid media or really any form of digital media particularly. And what we found in auditing literally hundreds of clients is they don't even have the tracking set up correctly. And if they do, they're not necessarily looking at the right performance metrics. So I'll give you an example. When I worked with many big brands in the big agency world, I would see teams and clients and also the team members within agencies celebrating things like link clicks and CTR rate on a social media campaign. But if you actually dig into the data and look at the website traffic, it was mostly spam that was coming to the site and nobody was taking it a step further. So in many cases, they have the right tracking, but the big agency can't get access to it, or there's no expertise around how are we actually measuring the outcome here. And so the number one thing we do is we audit a client's analytics. We audit their tracking. We audit how their events are set up in Google Tag Manager, which is a platform that's used for tracking marketing performance. And we make sure that we measure qualified metrics, not just quantity. So it's very easy to run a social campaign and drive a bunch of traffic and say, oh, this is great, 75 cents per click. The campaign is doing fantastic. The CTR is above the benchmark. But when you dig into the data, it looks like those people that you're sending to your website, they're spending less than a second on the website and they're not completing any meaningful actions. And so what happens in that case is you end up paying money to drive a lot of junk traffic. And digital advertising is wrought with spam and bots, because there are huge bot farms that make millions off of this. And so as a good steward of your client's marketing budget and their media dollars, you need to really dig into a lot of this. And so one way that we do that is through qualified metrics. For example, we can look at the time that a user spends on a website to determine if they're, number one, a real person, and number two, if they are they actually interested in what you have to offer as a brand or as a company? And then, of course, you can get further down the funnel and optimize towards things like booking an appointment or completing an online sale. And some of the best brands that are really deep into performance marketing do this very, very well. But what we've found in working with large PR agencies, creative shops, branding firms, they're not so good at it. And so that's where we've really, I think, tended to focus our efforts, is in working with these clients, making sure they have the right analytics, the right tracking systems in place. So then when we do put a strategy together, when we do start launching some paid ads, we know how to optimize, and we know whether or not that these ads are successful in driving that desired outcome.
Yeah. And I hate to bring up the word vanity metrics, but if that's what people are chasing and if that's what people are paying for, then they're not paying for results. And it sounds like what you're doing is eliminating that so that they can actually pay for results.
That's exactly right. And vanity metrics is the perfect term. We use that all the time because many clients are focused on that because it looks good in a PowerPoint presentation, right? But is it actually moving the needle in the business? Majority of the case is not.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's unfortunate. But the great thing is that you are able to step in and help them shift that. So if you notice that a campaign is falling flat, right? How do you pivot? Like, how do you tell somebody nicely, this is just not working and we need to fix it?
Yeah, I think empathetic communication is key, right? So whenever we find something that's really wrong with a client's campaign or their setup or their tracking, we try and say it in a nice way. We say, hey, here's actually what is going well. Actually, your keyword targeting is good. Your ad copy looks pretty solid, but we noticed that your bid structure and your account structure is wrong. You're bidding on the wrong objectives. You're not optimizing what you're paying for your bids. And so we'll typically, in an audit scenario, break down what we see in our unbiased, opinion. Here's what you're doing well, and here's what can be improved. Very rarely do we find an account where they're doing everything perfectly and absolutely nothing can be improved. Although we had a couple of those, and kudos to those brands and those clients. And so when we're pulling together an assessment, we do try and look at it holistically. So we start, again, what are the business goals? We work our way backwards and say, all right, let's look at the channels that you're activating. I don't just want to look at platform metrics because those can be deceiving. So if you're relying only on Google Ads or only on Facebook ads platform for your metrics, you're really only getting half the picture. So we got to dig in deeper. We have to look into the website analytics. And beyond that, we have to look into any business intelligence systems that a client might have set up, because even your web analytics can be deceiving, right? There are a lot of issues with Google Analytics and GA4 not reporting 100% accurate data. So it's really about connecting the pieces of that puzzle and making sure that we can tie what's happening on the media side to what's happening in the actual business. And it's not a perfect science, and it's not always easy because there's a lot of different systems that clients use. There's always a disconnect between one system and the other system. So it is a lot of strategic thinking that goes into how do we actually configure these different platforms and systems so that they can more effectively communicate with one another, and how can we really think about effective tracking from the media to the actual business outcome we want to drive.
Yeah. And that sounds like it's very much aligned with what's going on in almost every industry these days, which is a lot of people who are pulling ahead are offering more comprehensive and holistic support across the board. It's like, we don't only use Google Analytics. That's only a piece of the puzzle. That's only one snapshot of the picture. But if the picture is of, this narrow window, and actually there's all of this other content and data to look at, I think that's a critical piece. Mm-hmm. So what's a good example of how you would build a custom paid media strategy across vastly different industries like e-commerce and hospitality, some of the people that you work with?
Yeah, so we do take a somewhat of a bespoke approach to each industry. Now, we do specialize in some of the ones that you mentioned, right? But when it comes down to it, I think we have to understand the data and the insight. So the first thing that we'll usually do, aside from grounding ourselves in the business outcome, is conducting a data immersion. So really immersing ourselves in the client's data systems, whether it be ad platforms, web analytics, business intelligence systems. We want to get a very holistic picture as to what they're doing, what's working, what's not, and where are we seeing any gaps in the tracking or the analytics, and any gaps in performance, and ultimately how their campaigns and accounts are structured. And, typically what we'll see is a complete lack of optimizations. So most agencies and brands as well are guilty of setting up their paid media campaigns and kind of just letting them run. And then maybe they change them every month or whatever, but there is no structured approach to optimization. No one's going in there and doing certain things day in and day out to improve the performance. So one example might be adjusting your bids. Another example might be, looking at your top performing audiences or geos and moving budget around accordingly. Maybe you exclude certain placements that you're seeing have lower performance. These are the types of optimizations that we'll do on a daily and weekly basis, but you don't want to over tweak either, because a good setup is also really key. So there are certain things that you do, within those campaign structures to really drive the optimal performance. And that's been our focus, in working with clients and brands. And when we see, clients that are trying to take this on themselves, unfortunately, they just lack the expertise, because there is so much that goes into it. And because we're operating across so many different industries, there is a unique approach. So we have one client that has over 200,000 product SKUs, e-commerce, and we take a very different approach to a client who's, trying to run a healthcare awareness campaign. And the different platforms, the different ad objectives that are available within each platform support these different types of industries and these different clients. Now, we always try and take a channel agnostic approach, but in many cases, certain channels are better for certain types of brands based on where their audience is. So this goes back to the research and insights that I was talking about just earlier. The research that we conduct is, during the data immersion phase, but it's also beneficial to conduct research with your audience, whether it's existing customers or your target audience, understanding both quantitative and qualitative research. That's going to generate the insights that then fuel the messaging, the channel strategy, and the creative strategy for your campaigns. So research is really a crucial component no matter which industry you're in. And then using that research to develop your strategy, to refine your messaging, to understand what resonates with people. It doesn't matter whether it's e-commerce or, whether it's, hospitality, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that your message resonates. And you do that by simply asking your customers, right? So you have to have these conversations with your customers. Or if you don't have any customers, if you're a new company, you're starting out, going out and talking to people that, fit your target audience, and be specific. A lot of brands say, oh, no, we want to sell to everyone. And very rarely is that the case, right? In most instances, there needs to be a very specific target audience that you're going after. So that way you can be very, very specific with your strategy. So where do we show up as a brand? How do we show up there? And really, and this is an important component, investing in your brand, not just the lower funnel, which is, we're a paid media agency. So we can appreciate the fact that clients want to drive conversions. They want to drive an efficient return on ad spend. But the way to do that is by investing in the top and mid funnel and then re-engaging those audiences effectively with lower funnel campaigns. And so that's really the subject of my new book that's coming out, Brand Powered Media, is invest in the brand, build that emotional connection, because that's your differentiator between your competitors. And no matter which industry you're in, that's what's going to make your performance campaigns more effective and more efficient.
Yeah. I'm excited about the new book. It's Brand Powered Media.
Yes.
And, I do think it's interesting because a lot of people do think it's, should I invest in my brand? Should I invest in my performance marketing? What are your thoughts on that?
So the answer is absolutely. You should be investing in both. And you shouldn't be doing it in silos. The brand team should be very closely tied to the performance team and vice versa, right? Performance people are really good at data, the science behind marketing, optimizing every little thing to drive that 1% improvement of your conversion rate, right? But the brand people, they're good at telling stories and building emotional connections with an audience. And that's the real equity that you want in your company, because that is something that can't be replicated from AI or from a search ad, because that brand equity is really what's going to fuel your company or your brand. And that's ultimately going to be the fuel that fires your performance media campaigns, because the performance campaigns in a vacuum or in a silo, they can be effective for a time. But after a while, you will see diminishing returns. You'll see your costs go up. You'll see your results go down compared to brands that invest in the full funnel. They invest both in building brand equity and building brand awareness and building that emotional resonance with the audience. They're going to beat you, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So it is so important. There's a ton of great case studies out there that we're going to be including in the book. And, very excited about sharing some of those because all of the results bear that out.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it, honestly. So, okay, here's the $1 million question. Since you are a professional marketer and you help people with marketing all the time, what do you do to grow your own business?
Yeah. So in my business, we're B2B. We sell to other businesses. And so it is a little bit of a different strategy. So we do some paid media, but mostly I'm focused on thought leadership and building relationships with individuals. And so what we do on the B2B side, and we have some B2B clients as well, right? And paid media can be effective when used strategically, but for the most part, we really recommend a integrated content marketing strategy. So continuously publishing, thought leadership, doing podcasts, attending industry conferences, speaking at those conferences, contributing to business publications, trade magazines. And so that's a lot of what I do, actually. So I'm doing a lot of podcasting. I'm doing a lot of writing for Forbes and Media Post and other big trade pubs, and also networking. So consistently reaching out to colleagues, past clients, current clients, adding value, asking, how can I help? Is there anything I can do for you? Can I refer you a client? Vice versa. Something we do also is we pay referral fees to individuals or companies that could send us clients or send us potential opportunities. And another thing is partnering with complementary agencies. So we're a paid media agency. So we pair really well with PR agencies, creative or branding agencies, because that's not a service that they offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times we will be a strategic partner to complementary agencies. And we find that that's been really effective. But also what's old is new, right? I mean, building a human connection in the age of AI is really important. And so, nurturing relationships, building relationships. I actually just did a LinkedIn post about this today is, the relationships are everything. So, people talk about ROI and we talk about ROR, return on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
How are you, sowing into your existing relationships and helping people as much as you can? And we find that that's been really beneficial in growing our business.
Yeah, amazing. Super brilliant. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Now, one thing is we're kind of hit with a rough market and in the US right now. What's one of the biggest obstacles that you face as far as your own company growth?
I would say, our biggest obstacle is consistent and regular growth that is driven by a sales strategy. For me, I think as we enter our, probably 6th year in business next month, I think the biggest area of focus for me in growing the business and the biggest challenge that we faced is that consistency. A lot of marketing agencies rely on networking, word of mouth, referrals, right? And that's good to an extent, but it could also, it can plateau. And so, what are some other things that we can do to, grow the business more consistently to make sure that we have a regular pipeline of new opportunities, right? And so that's something I'm starting to explore, right? Because again, I came from a world where everything was driven by referrals, and it's helped me grow my business to where it is now, and continuing to lean into that, but also exploring new channels, new opportunities. So as I mentioned, doing podcasts like we're doing right now, but also writing the book, attending conferences, looking to speak at some of these conferences. I think that's going to be, the key challenge for us and for me this year is to how can I get out there in a bigger way to really start showing the industry, what we have to offer, and also how are we different, right? That's the key.
Yeah. Great stuff. Now, for people listening to the podcast, people watching the podcast, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, well, they could follow me on LinkedIn. Just look up my name. Or if you like, you can visit our website, valomedia.com. And there you can request a free audit. So we love providing, analyses to clients or prospects that are interested in knowing, hey, how are my paid media campaigns doing? Is there room for improvement? Are we wasting ad dollars? So absolutely would encourage anyone listening, if they're interested, please reach out. We're happy to provide, our unbiased assessment of their campaign performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Wonderful to speak with you. Super excited about the upcoming book. And I'm actually going to read that LinkedIn post as soon as this podcast is done.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Hey, for sure. Thank you. Have a great day.